Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It depends on what time you're listening. Welcome to The Solution. Nothing changes if we change nothing. We're so glad to see you here today on this very bright, sunny day now in still snow in New York. I'm Ronnie Katz and my
Chevar
cohort in crime,
Francis. Chevar Francis, the one and only.
the
Yeah.
one and only. And we're part of the New York City Prevention Resource Center.
hmm
But what a week. This was an interesting week.
Absolutely. We had a ton of snow,
Yes, about a
and
foot and a half,
we,
right?
yeah, brutal. And I didn't get a chance to go outside and enjoy it. I think it's kind of late. It's like the tail end of the snow, so I don't think I'm going to enjoy this one. It's supposed to
Oh,
snow again this weekend, so maybe I'll try to go out and enjoy that. But not only that, we had a snowstorm. There was also a conference, a week-long conference
yeah.
that normally we would be in person. So I was like the whole time, like, wow, how would this work? But I forget it's all encased, it's indoors. So as long as you get there, you're okay. Like it's not like conferences where I've been at where I would have to leave the hotel to go across the street to a convention center. Luckily, CACA does a good job of having everything in one place so you don't have to leave. So that's helpful.
Getting there would have been the issue because
Yeah, yeah,
I was thinking about that because we had the big snowstorm starting Sunday all day Monday. Monday
yeah,
would have been the travel. Well, Sunday would have been the travel day
yeah,
actually for
yeah,
Katka. And I kept getting memories on Facebook of being in Katka like I think 4 or 5 years ago
right,
and seeing all these pictures of, of the DC area. And I'm like,
right.
wait a minute, we'd be there now. Or at least, some of us
No,
would.
no, I definitely was like, I'm like, how would this work out? And again, once you're inside, you're okay.
Yeah, well, the Gaylord, they always have them in the
Yeah,
Gaylords.
once you're indoors, so you should totally be fine. So that would be the only positive behind it. But other than that, like like, and I realized I don't like the winter. Other than the snow,
No?
no, then I don't like being cold.
Um, yeah,
I,
I've been enjoying it.
I'm a fall, spring, summer person, and I think I just don't like being cold. I'm like, wow, this is not fun.
I think a
Except
lot of people feel that way.
except for I mean, I guess because the pandemic started in the winter last year.
True.
And it's like that's the last time most of us have like truly been outside.
Right.
Like we've been outside. I'm not gonna say we haven't been out, but like to be able to go out and then it's like a year later we're still in the same position, so to speak. And
Yeah,
you
it's
look out the
almost a
window.
year.
Yeah,
Weird.
it's
But
yeah, it's almost a year. In a few weeks will be a full year of
it's hard to believe.
yeah.
Tomorrow's the first death in the United States from COVID-19
Wow.
year. And look how many people have died. It just,
Wow.
and I mean, I know you know people who and are
Absolutely.
related to
Oh,
people as
yeah.
I am as well. And it's just
Unfortunately.
still shocking to me every time I hear about somebody I know getting it, and it's still so shocking almost a year later.
I mean, it's one of the scariest things. It's like this invisible. On our last episode, we talked about it. Like it's an invisible boogeyman, this big invisible person
I
that
know.
that just shows up that we now just acknowledge. COVID did this, or COVID like it's an event. It's an event. It's a person. It's all the
Yeah.
above.
I, I'm laughing because Wanda Sykes would have a ball with that because she does a character around her her menopause who she calls Esther. Esther's hungry, but when we just I'm picturing Wanda Sykes kind of doing a routine on COVID. Well, COVID said, but yeah, we were laughing about it because sometimes you have to, but it's just been a shocking,
No, absolutely,
devastating,
man.
enlightening experience because there's some things that came out of it that have led to a lot of self-realizations and ingenuity and just we're real resilient people.
And I think some of the I'm going to refer to CACA. There were workshops about that, about
Right.
how to deal with this normal. And someone said like having a new normal or going back to the old normal. And I think how I look at it is this is just normal. Because like what is a new normal? Like this is currently a new normal. No one wants to live in a pandemic. This is
Right.
now became our normal. Like
Right.
to have Zoom meetings 4 or 5 times a day, like it's crazy, to do. I'm going to 2 baby showers via Zoom. within the next 2 weeks.
Do they still play games?
I don't know. This is going to be weird. Like, how do you, like, literally 2 baby showers, one on the 7th, I believe, and the next one on the 20th,
Wow.
over the weekend via Zoom. That's normal.
That's so wild. But I
Normal.
mean, people want things to still go on.
Yeah.
Well, you know, it's weird. Like I went to college. I started college in 1969.
Mhm.
And the friends that I made 70 and beyond. I used to hang out in the science building at Queensborough Community College and play guitar all day with these amazing musicians. And
Mhm.
we've stayed in touch, and we've tried to have a reunion for years, and we can never get our schedules together. Well, now we can get together once a month because we have Zoom. And I've
Yeah.
gotten to see people that I hadn't seen some in 45, 50 years. Well, 45 years maybe. And it's like we just saw each other like a week ago. We fall right into the banter, and it's so comfortable. But this would not be possible without this, you know.
No, yeah,
What's going on now.
definitely. I think that's the main gift, that you are able to connect with people you probably, if not for the old normal, you wouldn't, like, a lot of people we wouldn't see. Like, people wouldn't be planning family reunions. Like, when this is over, we gotta get together. Like, people, like, you know, I do like Zoom painting classes with my family members. Like, we wouldn't have been doing this, you know, if not for, like, that's the one gift, you know, if COVID, the person, the thing, the event has given us, it's a way to reconnect. You know, granted, you
Mhm.
know, most of us would love to see each other face to face, and, you know, and I can't wait till that happens. Like, I want to travel. I miss getting on a plane. I just miss being outside. Like, I miss it. I mean, I go outdoors to go shopping, but not to enjoy it.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I know I do my food shopping, and I try to hit 3 stores in an hour and a half and run through the stores because I don't want to be in there long. And I try to
Absolutely.
go during senior hour, and you know, I don't want to be around all these crowds of people.
And yeah, I'm just trying to see what concerts will look like when this is over. You know, weddings, or any large place of large gatherings. You know, hospitals. You know, anywhere where schools. What does that look like? Like, I don't know, because, like, this is unprecedented. This is something that I know that, I mean, I can't look back at any history books and say that this people, you know, have addressed this or parts. I mean, they probably have, but I'm living it. We're living
Yeah, this is
it.
unlike anything we've had in our lifetimes, and
No,
there'll
yeah,
always be that. You know, there's certain things you'll always remember. From my generation, we remember when JFK was killed,
right,
when Bobby Kennedy was killed, when Martin
right,
Luther King was killed,
right.
Malcolm X. But you know, the kids today, they're going to talk about that unwelcome guest, COVID.
Who invited you in? You're a vampire. No one said you can come into my house. Like, you're 100% right. Like, I know I mentioned to you, like, my 2-year anniversary of the PRC is coming up, and I
Yeah.
wasn't able to celebrate my 1-year anniversary because of this individual called COVID. Like, I was talking to someone, like, wow, a whole year went by. Wait a minute, I've been here 2 years almost.
Yeah.
This is
And
crazy.
you know,
Like,
yeah, yeah. As you're saying that, I'm like, oh, holy, you know what?
yeah.
Oh
like
man.
like I didn't even, you know, think of it, you know, and there's that bell again when I'm talking and it happens and someone interrupts me. It hasn't happened in a few episodes, but that's cool. That
It happened the
means
last one. But
oh,
I
man.
think it happened to me once. Well, we have our guest here today. Hey, Jasmine.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you, absolutely. How are you
Yay.
today?
I'm good. How are you both?
I'm
Good.
digging the pink wall. I'm from Harlem, so you know pink and purple is our colors. So I'm digging the pink wall behind you.
I'm in a toddler's bedroom, so that's why.
Well, we're glad to see you. And what we like to do is when our guests get here, is let them introduce themselves and talk about, you know, who you are and what you do.
Okay, so hi, thanks for having me. I'm Jazmin Rivera. I'm the Director of Behavioral Health and Evaluation at the Staten Island Partnership for Community Wellness, and I am the Project Director for TYSA, which is a behavioral health community coalition on Staten Island.
And one that has risen to the top of the coalition list. You know, people around the state know, everybody knows TYSA now. It's become something that people turn to when they want to give an example of a coalition that operates well. So TYSA is definitely, at the top of the list when people think of successful coalitions.
Thank you. It feels good to know.
Yeah.
Can you give us like a brief history of TYSA and how you came to be a part of TYSA, if that's possible?
Sure, me specifically. So yes, I'll give you my pitch, right? So TYSA was formed in 2011. I think what's interesting about us when we think about the lexicon of coalitions across the state and in general is that we have hybridized a couple of different models. So in 2010-ish, our local foundation identified this model called collective impact as an organizing framework for tackling complex topics, right? Complex social issues. So our whole community in Staten Island got together and prioritized youth substance use as the issue and landed on underage drinking and prescription drug use for Staten Island specifically. So that's really what we were framed around originally, right? Was using communities that care model and also collective impact as a framework to make those things happen. And then in 2014, we got our first DFC. So we became an official drug-free communities coalition, but that came after we had already formed. And I think that's what's a little bit different about TYSA. We were already kind of chugging along for a couple of years when we became a drug-free communities coalition and got connected to the rest of the stuff happening across the state. So even though we originally were working on, again, underage drinking and prescription drugs, always looking at the data, things started to change, as you folks know. Folks started to transition to heroin, fentanyl came about, different things popped up like benzodiazepines, tranquilizer, all of these other things just started to happen and our community started to shift. So as that was happening, TYSA is very data-driven and always looking at evidence-based solutions. So keeping our eyes on the data and on the prize, right, and shifting. And that's how we really started to fill out and have a large, robust coalition. And we also worked across the continuum. So we were never just prevention, always thinking about early intervention, treatment, harm reduction, and recovery as part of our framework, which I think is also a little bit different. So we have an executive committee, steering committee, powerful work groups that are thinking really hard about strategies, really focusing on risk and protective factors, not just substance use, which is the downstream thing, right? Thinking about what the conditions that make those things possible is what we try to focus on as much as possible. And then in 2019, we also brought mental health into our organizing framework. So now we're a behavioral health coalition, not just a substance use coalition. So that's my high level pitch. I can go deep.
That was a lot. I've been to a lot of your meetings, and you do. I'm just gonna say this: you can pack so much, and I think it's amazing because I talk fast. When I hear you talk, it's like this wavelength. For me, it slows down, but everyone's like, "Oh, she's talking so fast." No, it's perfect. But anyway, how do you I've been in the TYSA meetings, and you guys continue to have this strong road group. How you guys continue that during the pandemic? What is that like? How has the framework changed? Is it consistent? How did you adapt? Go for it.
Yeah. So this pandemic has been horrible, right? We think about the issues, and behavioral health is scary right now, right? And it's even more stressful, I think, that because we're focusing so much on the downstream impacts of COVID, people getting sick, which is really important. It's of the utmost importance, but because all the attention was diverted towards that, we weren't thinking about the underlying behavioral health issues that were already happening and the things that are exacerbated because folks are stuck in their houses. I know we're safe at home, but not everyone is safe at home, right? Some people are home with parents that are yelling at them, children at home with parents are yelling at them. Some people can't keep up with school, and that's really exacerbating them and making them anxious and depressed. We have to-go alcohol coming to places, and I don't think they're carding when you get to someone's house and you ordered a tequila or a margarita when you get your tacos. Are they carding when that comes to that house? No, kids have access to alcohol and maybe other drugs in ways that they haven't in other times. So the issues are still there, and they're harder to get to because kids aren't in school. They're not at community centers. They're not in the places that we normally see people. Parents aren't on the ferry or on the bus as much, which is where we do most of our media and marketing outreach. So the issue is bigger and it's harder to access people. So early on, we identified this need to, first of all, this sounds very processy, but it was important for us, make our executive committee bigger. So it's usually about 5 folks who are thinking about the day-to-day stuff that TYSA is working on while the steering committee meets every month, with us as staff. And we made that group larger. It needed to be more diverse. So we brought in someone from the district attorney's office. We brought in someone from other areas, to come and fill that out. So it wasn't just us normal prevention and treatment and recovery folks talking about it. It was a more robust group. And we're meeting every 2 weeks because we are we need to do this, we need to do that. It was there are targets everywhere. And we started to transition everything that we're doing online. So parent workshops online, supporting school teachers in social emotional learning implementation online, lots of social media and marketing outreach. So we were putting out very early on in the first couple of weeks of the pandemic, virtual support groups. And you folks did a great job of pulling that list together too. Like we got those things right up on our website really quickly, right? Like making sure people knew they had access to things. And even though it's really bad, in some cases, telehealth has made services more accessible, in some cases not as, right? But people are able to engage with things that aren't just on the island now. So it's been great to have like city-based, like where you couldn't get into Manhattan before, and maybe virtual like therapy or support groups that people can access. So putting everything on a virtual platform was really intense. And then thinking about supporting just our coalition members who are like out there doing the work. If you're doing treatment or residential things, like you still are going to work. Like I'm a public health person, I get to stay home, right? And like think about these strategies when other people are like at their desk, seeing clients, seeing patients, and it's wild. So supporting our partners in the best ways that we could. So whenever someone asked for something or needed help as a TYSA partner, doing our best to support and implement those things. So one of the things that we did that was successful is linked up with the Department of Education to have a mental health forum in the spring. So like 100 school personnel and parents came to think about self-care, to think about drug prevention, to think about parenting, because something that's important to me, because I have babies now, is that social emotional learning is like, we think about it like it's this like special thing that happens. Like that's drug prevention too. It is a special thing, but it's drug prevention. And that stuff also happens at home. Like the way that I parent my children is very based around like positive psychology and positive discipline and like learning with them and communication and letting them make decisions. Those are things that you learn in SEL, and those are things you learn in drug prevention programming, like how to make smart choices, how to like negotiate issues, right? Like those are things that happen in parenting too, but we don't think about it like that. So trying to reach parents to talk about SEL starts at home, social emotional learning starts at home, and you're setting the foundation for later good choices, later not developing substance use disorder, later if people initiate use, maybe being able to reach out to like an adult so that they can stop that earlier and not develop a substance use disorder. So that's some stuff, but basically virtual is what's been happening.
Yeah, I mean, I'm constantly getting emails about all the great things going on, but you mentioned something so important, and we have this discussion a lot, that, you know, very often people look at prevention with such a narrow lens, but prevention has a wide net. There's so much you can do. And, you know, we focus so much on the risk factors, we forget that risk factors change relatively, you know, little over the years. I mean, really, the same risk factors pretty much exist. We may add to them, but protective factors could be increased. There's a much better success rate at increasing those protective factors, or as the Search Institute calls them, the 40 developmental assets. And the things you're talking about are all on that list of the 40 developmental assets. If we build those assets, we are doing incredible prevention work because it pays off down the road. So when you said that, like the light went on for me, because when Chevar came to work for us, he was running after school centers. And I said, well, you've been doing prevention for years, you know, and that was something that it took him about 5 seconds to realize, like, wait a minute. Yeah. Share.
No, I didn't realize it. So I'm on this interview with Ronnie, and she was like, have you ever done coalition work? And I'm like, well, to explain what coalition work. So I actually, in my neighborhood, help the youth program. Same concept, sit in a circle, have your different sectors. Didn't conceptualize that it was a coalition, right? Worked in the after school program, worked in the DOE. Didn't conceptualize that the school leadership team is a coalition within the building. It's the same concept. You have law enforcement, you have health, you know, and then to push it even further, the after school program is an alternative to doing other things other than drugs, alcohol, any other adverse situation that a child would have to face, you know. And Ronnie said, you've been doing this the entire time. You've been giving kids an outlet, like we had archery, we had cooking, we had capoeira, we had dance. We had so many things to give kids outlets to say, I'd rather be here than be out in the streets. I've been a program director for probably 16 years. And I always tell this story. There's no instant gratitude in that work. When you see this young person 5, 6, 7 years later, when they have like a beard or a child or a job, and they come up to you and say, hey, Mr. Chevar, you have no clue who they are. No clue, but you just nod your head and go, yes. And they say, thank you. And that's always happens. You don't remember me? You were the person that told me that I should be here, I shouldn't be out there, and I thank you. Or parents who come to me, you know, and say thank you for keeping my child off the street, like, you know, giving them that alternative. I didn't realize it was prevention at the time. I just thought I was doing my job, you know. So So Ronnie, and I always say, Ronnie, thank you for letting me know that I was doing it. I was actually practicing prevention the entire time. And I think that's two things that, listening that we have to remind people is that what prevention is and what it looks like and what they're doing is possibly prevention. And I'm glad Jasmine mentions SEL. I remember running after school programs and saying to parents what SEL, explaining to parents what SEL was and them not fully understanding it. And using that term regularly, I think would help. That social emotional learning. What does that actually mean? What is socializing? What is emotion? What is learning? Those three words separately and bringing them together. I think that's really important. And when you said SEL, I was like, yes. And then when you said what it meant, I was like, yes. And you saw my thumb go up. I got excited because that's the life I've come from. And hearing people talk about it and going to TYSA meetings and hear you guys talk about what you guys are doing in the schools and so forth. I'm doing a lot of talking. This is about Jasmine.
No, but that's awesome because it's the stuff too that we don't think about, right? It's like the after school, the parenting, like all of that is SEL, and I deeply love it, and I get very excited too. So I'm always happy to see someone else like get charged up about like yes, raising babies, this is great. But what also stresses me out though is like when I think we do a great job. So I have a 3-year-old and a 5-month-old. We do a pretty good job in early childhood education doing SEL because it's very much about like trying to de-escalate situations, trying to co-regulate all of those things that you do with like babies, right? Like if they're freaking out, you're instead of yelling at them, stop doing that in schools. They're saying, what's going on? How can I support you? Like, do you need to go over here to calm down? That happens in early childhood education. When you get a little bit older in elementary school, hopefully it's still happening, but maybe not as often. By the time you're in high school, SEL becomes like meditation and mindfulness, which is super important, but it's not implemented with the same type of like school-wide or classroom-wide intentionality as it is when they're babies. And I would argue that when you're in high school and you're like full of hormones and your brain's doing all this weird stuff, like you need that kind of support and guidance and structure more than ever. And that's when we kind of pull back from our kids, and that's when they're starting to try drugs and when they're starting to, and right now that's when they're really isolated on their computers in their bedroom all day watching YouTube, but after they zoomed for 6 hours. So I would argue that's the time you need to get closer to your kids instead of pulling back. But the way America's so weird, the way that we think it's like the closer you get to 18, like you're an adult now and you don't need me anymore. And our brains aren't developed until we're 25, 26. So that doesn't make sense. But that's how our country is formed. So we're really passionate about trying to make sure the SEL like stuff isn't just happening with the babies, even though it should be happening with the babies because they're so magic and that's setting the foundation. But it needs to be happening like across the life course, and it needs to be happening at home too. And I'm happy that you said that, Chevar. And I think sometimes though, what I've been trying to do is talk to parents about parenting and not about SEL necessarily, because I think sometimes like the words, it feels like, oh, they're at school. If it's learning, they should be learning at school, right? But when you get to school, they're like, oh, they should be doing that at home. So it's like, who's in charge? But when you talk to parents about parenting and like what we can control and how we can support our kids and how literally we nurture them from like babyhood on can change the way that they react to situations, change the way that their synapses are connecting. Like that's important stuff. And they don't tell you that. Like no one told me that as a parent. I had to like deep dive into Google and like get on, like read articles. Like I had to do that myself. No one told me that. So it's important for parents to be empowered to have that information.
So my question is, how do we, and maybe you're already doing this with prevention and SEO. Like, what does that look like? If you and TYSA are already doing this, have you guys started? Have you had your work group around this? Like, what does that look like? Or is that in the plans?
So that part is in the plans, right? Because the SEL that we have been doing so far has been younger, right? We've been supporting elementary aged SEL, even though again, drug prevention programming is also social emotional learning, but it doesn't happen with all the kids or all classrooms. Like you folks know, like if we have our SAPIS, the substance abuse prevention intervention specialist, or like an after school program, it reaches a portion of the kids at the school, but not everyone uniformly. So it's not the same. And again, I love drug prevention, but if it's like too good for drugs, even though it has those like SEL strategies, it does have a focus that's on substance use prevention, which is key important. But sometimes it's hard to link those like also being outcomes around like mental health and like increasing success for graduation, which like SEL can do that too, right? Like you feel more attached to your school and then you're more likely to graduate. Like those are things that happen from SEL programs too. So that's something that we're working on, right? Is supporting teachers, school personnel, and administration, understanding that yoga and meditation are so important, but they're not the end all be all. So right now we're pulling together a toolkit. We have a menu of services for, it started as a substance use prevention menu, not prevention, substance use disorder, right? Menu of services. And we just threw in our SEL page in there too, that we give to schools. And it's kind of like a toolkit, like what's the name of your SAPIS? What's the name of your guidance counselor? What's the name of your social worker? Do you have drug prevention programming? If not, here are the 4 people that you can call to get a program. Do you need a speaker? If yes, call this number and we will connect you to someone who's vetted and it's not gonna like scared straight your children and freak them out, right? Like then traumatize them. If you need an after school program, here's someone who does SEL and prevention work. So it's like we have that for schools. So there's a one-stop shop. They don't have to go searching through the internet because again, you folks know something bad happens, a child overdoses or someone's parent overdoses. The schools start to get hungry for like, oh my God, we need to have someone come in and speak. We need to have a program. And it's overwhelming. If you get on the internet and start looking, all of this stuff pops up. How do you know which stuff is the right stuff to come into your school? So we made that menu so they can support that specifically. And right now, in addition to all of that stuff, we're trying to really focus on supporting like Black and brown young folks. Staten Island is an interesting place. I'll say it like that, right? Where we're not like the other boroughs of New York City. Our demographics are very different. We have like 60, 70% white on Staten Island. So if you're just looking at the high level data, sometimes our outcomes, it looks like it's just affecting white folks, or it looks like things aren't that bad, or it looks like things are trending in the right direction, which in many cases they are. But when you start to disaggregate the data, you can see sometimes that Black and brown folks are really suffering. And we're seeing that, again, you know, the national conversation and local conversation, because Staten Island is in the news all the time for opioids, is usually about like middle-class white folks, right? Not about Black and brown folks. And there's this mantra too of people being upset, which as rightly so, that during the crack epidemic and heroin in the 70s and 80s, nobody cared because it was Black folks. And I feel like I've heard people push back and say, well, now we know better, so we can do better. But the data now is saying, or like we didn't know, and now that's in the past. So we're dealing with what's happening now. But when you look at the data, the first quarter of DOHMH data for 2020 that was released, increases in communities of color and overdoses in ways that they hadn't seen before. If you're looking at youth risk behavior survey data for 2017, I want to say Black and brown folks using some drugs at higher rates than our white peers. And the drugs are like, in addition to opioids, like cocaine and like things that you wouldn't be thinking about Black and brown youth using higher than their white peers is what's happening. So we're really trying to do some work to build trust, because since the conversation has been so much about white folks, especially in Staten Island, people are like, why do you guys care about us now? So it's like trying to build that trust. And then message, because when I've had a lot of conversations with young Black students, right, it's like showing like we had an overdose prevention campaign happening for a long time. I don't know if you remember this. Ronnie, you might remember it. Chevar, I think it was before you got here, was like this big, it was like an OD and it was crossed out and it was like a white line. It was like an opioid. And it was like, don't overdose, do. And it was like, prevention messaging around that, around overdose prevention. I was focus grouping it with some young folks at a school next door to my office. And they were like, I don't know anyone who uses heroin. Like Black people don't use that drug. This was in like 2017. But the data says that you do, right? So, but you can't have a conversation. Like as a parent, I can't have a conversation with my kids about the risk of heroin or opioid use if I don't think that that's happening in my community, but it is. So that's the important part, like changing the narrative of the conversation so parents can have those conversations with their kids, so that kids can feel empowered to say, oh, now I know what this is. I'm not going to use that. That's not going to happen to me. And then like making reparations, because it has sucked the way that it's been handled. So that's been really important to us too. And thinking about trauma and thinking about healing. So that's where SEL fits in again with drug prevention, right? It's like, especially in COVID times, trauma, trauma, trauma. Communities are traumatized. And it's horrifying. And we don't want to think about people as deficit focused, right? So we're trying to approach it as a healing centered solutions, right? Like how do we support healing in with everyone, but in communities that have been hardest hit by COVID, by substance use, by all these different things. And now I'm monologuing, so.
I have a quick question. I know Ronnie has a question, but I have a question because I brought this up in a meeting once upon it, well, earlier this year, about the word trauma and how growing up as a person, a Black person, we didn't really talk about the word trauma. When we heard the word trauma is when we went to the hospital, like if you got hurt. So how, like, what does that dialogue look now, you know, in 2020, 2021 right now, actually, like speaking to people who didn't normally were afforded the ability to have mental health services, to have the therapist, what have you, like, and hearing this word trauma being used, like it's been in our, well, I'm gonna speak for me, has been in my vocabulary my entire life, when it hasn't been a part of my vocabulary. Like the time, like I said, when I heard it, is I got hurt from playing basketball. You got leg trauma, you got shoulder, you got these bodily traumas, not actually mental issues. And sorry for the term, but like, what does that look like now, or is it changing?
So it's trauma is a complicated word, and I feel like
Very complicated word.
yeah, like I try to keep the word trauma in like academic spaces or like at the coalition level as much as possible. But when we're talking to parents and young people, trying to use more like asset-based language, because trauma is complicated. Like communities are traumatized. Like I feel traumatized by all the things that have been happening. I'll speak for myself. Like
Absolutely, me too.
I feel traumatized. But if you keep feeding to people like you're traumatized, like that's not helpful either, right? So it's like focusing on how I try to approach it and how we're trying to approach this coalition. Like everything should be patient-centered, right? We just went through a whole slew of like anti-racism training. We had a healing session. We had a foundation come out, the Courageous Conversations Foundation come out and do a racial healing session with our coalition. And then like 3 more sessions so that people can start to have these hard conversations about race, because until you can talk about race, you can't even start to get at these nuances, right? Because Chevar, if you said that to someone, they might shut down and be like, oh, I said the wrong thing. Now I can't talk to you. Now I'm scared to have this conversation because I don't want to say it wrong. And on both, like that's not helpful, right? Like if you're in mental health or substance use treatment, you can't shut down when people like challenge you. Like you can't do that. So we're trying to get people the tools to be able to talk about race itself and then have better language. So I didn't answer your question, but trauma is a complicated word. And when we're talking to parents, kids, we try not to say, like, you're traumatized about trauma. We try to say things like the stress that you're holding on to, like it manifests in your body. George Floyd being murdered, that's a collective thing that the whole entire Black community felt. You feel that in your body. It affects you. It affects your brain. We need to deal with that. We need to work on that. We had to identify some strategies so that you don't have to hold that in your body by yourself.
I think the word we heard a lot was stigma, opposed to trauma. To trauma. That was the word.
It's still a thing. And it's like,
yeah.
It's tough. Like in my own life, I'm like looking for therapists. I'm like, I don't know if I want to go to someone in Staten Island because I know all these people. It's like, it's hard. So I totally understand.
But, and every 5-10 years, we have a new word or a new term or a new theory, but the bottom line is that we never deal with the root causes of things. And one of my frustrations, I love doing prevention work. I've been doing it since '89, and I did it in the schools as a SAPist, and that's what I love doing it there, because we started dealing with the root causes. But when we don't deal with the root causes, with the family, with the neighborhood, with the faith-based institutions, we were at a workshop last week on faith-based trauma. We don't really take it full circle. If we don't, we just make these little incremental changes. At CAGA, they were talking about, alcohol use has gone down since 2014. And then I'm like, okay, but what's gone up? We never look at that. There's like this, we were always playing this balancing act, like, yeah, well, alcohol use went down, but look how much marijuana use went up. There's always something. So we don't deal with the root causes. And I think that's really what it comes down to. And, when I'm listening to everything we're saying, and, social emotional learning, it all gets to that. And teaching people how to, live their lives in a different way with the right tools. We hadn't been doing that in the past, but this is so great that prevention is really starting to look at it now. This is not that frustrates me when they'll ask, well, what drugs are you going to focus on? It's not about the drugs. I'm in long-term recovery, sustained recovery, as a friend says, for 23 years now. It wasn't about the drugs. It was about a lot more. And until I could deal with the issues, with the stress, the trauma, whatever you want to call it, that drove me to use and continue to be a sustained user, I couldn't start healing. And it's so important for prevention to embrace that, because we tend to put a Band-Aid on things, and we look at, environmental strategies are great, but they're not the end all be all. Without the other stuff, we're not going to really make a dent. We've got to look at the whole person, the whole community, the whole society. And that's something that we haven't done well as a society, as a field overall, but it's starting to change. And I'm really, really encouraged by that.
And I think think that, Ryan, that's so true. And I'm sure you've talked about this on this podcast before, the city's prevention organizing framework. So the camp grants that are happening across the city. Have you talked about that? So
Yes.
supporting, okay, so what's really lovely about what the City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene is doing for, I think this is the first time they've ever funded prevention coalitions. It started, we're in year 3, so it started a couple of years ago. It was really organizing coalitions to support LGBTQ plus or LGBTQIA young folks. But what's been magical about that grant is that we're able to not focus on drugs. The same thing you're saying, Ronnie, like we have to pick risk and protective factors to intervene around. Like we, in our needs assessment, we say what drugs people are using. And it's, you folks know, in LGBTQ plus or LGBTQIA communities across the city, all the drugs are higher than their counterparts, right? Like it doesn't matter. Like you said, like the drugs don't matter. It's not about that. It's about the risk and protective factors. So we're doing a body positivity campaign. We have youth consultants that we hired. They're 18 to 25. We pay them LGBTQIA or allies. They're developing this campaign. It's a prevention campaign, but it's thinking about body positivity and how self-loathing and not loving your body can lead to mental health and substance use issues, right? Like self-medication and coping. So that's what we're focusing on. It is a way to get to prevention of substance use, but we're not addressing it as like, oh, we have these high alcohol rates. What can we do about alcohol? We're saying, how do we have people feel better in their bodies? How do we have media show more positive examples of what bodies can look like? And then by doing that, it will change the conditions of the community. And then folks will not use substances as much. It's not about the drugs. It's about what's happening. It's about what's happening in your family. It's about having a trusted adult in the community that you can go to if something is happening. It's about having someone at the school that you can talk to if someone's bothering you or if something's going on, or if you did try substances and now you don't know what to do, but you can't talk to your mom. Like you need to talk to someone about that. And if you don't have any of those people, those are risk factors, but they're protective factors if you do. So it's not about the drugs. It's the other stuff.
I think you just named our podcast episode. It's not about the drugs. But, well, I hate to say this, but we're getting towards that time where our time together is almost over. So we're going to have you back on. And maybe we could even, talk about the OHMH grants, because that's another whole line of topics right there. And that would be interesting. But we would love to have you come back on. But we like to end with a question that's completely off track. That we ask all our guests. And if you've listened to our podcast at all, you've probably heard us say it. What did you want to be when you were growing up? She's laughing.
Oh my goodness. All right, I'm going to say 2. I'm cheating. So when I was like I always want to be a veterinarian, and then I was like, oh my God, the dogs die. So I can't do that. So after that, I think I was in like 2nd or 3rd grade. I was like, I can't deal with this. I always wanted to, this was like not connected to anything. I was like, I'm going to grow up and I'm going to get a PhD so I can be super smart and teach people and do whatever I want. So I think that's what I always wanted to do when I was growing up. And I'm getting a doctorate now. So we're on the way. It took me a couple of years, but we're on the way.
What a role model you are. I think that's so wonderful. And I wanted to be a veterinarian too. So you're the first person who has said that. And then I wanted to be a rock star. But, I haven't given up on that yet either. But that's great. So you've realized your dreams. Yeah.
I wanted to be a NASCAR driver and a firefighter, but that didn't happen.
You never know, Chevar.
I don't want to be a firefighter.
That's what my dad was for 25 years.
He's an amazing man. Me, okay. I don't like the fire. I just like cooking.
I like sliding up and down the pole when I was a kid and playing in the trucks, but that's another.
But thank you, Jasmine. That was a lot of information. Like I got excited. Dude, you saw I got excited. I'm like, SEL, yes, stuff that I like. That's just me. And like Ronnie said, we definitely would love to have you back on our show if you're interested. And this episode should be out in a few days, and we'll let you know when.
Definitely. Just give me a focus topic so I can stay on track, because I could go everywhere.
Well, 3 fast talkers together, you get a lot covered.
I love it, man.
Well, thank you for coming. We're going to close out the show, so we'll see you next time. So we hate to kick you out, but,
I'm out.
We'll see you next time. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
This is great.
Happy Friday.
Yes, happy Friday. Oh,
that was good, man. That was a lot of information.
I could go another hour with her.
As she always does, man. Like she gets so much in within a small amount of time. I'm like, well, you said everything in 10 minutes. Like what else is there to do? Well, she kept going, which I thought was great, and just hearing her. There's other things I would love to talk to her about. She talked about the Black and brown people on the island. I would love to delve more into that. Even like her talking about the LGBTQ plus youth. There's a lot, that can be covered, over a few episodes or an episode, so to speak. But how do you feel?
Oh, that was great. I always enjoy talking to Jasmine because she is just a wealth of information and knowledge. And I've known TYSA since I started here, and watching them grow the way they have and diversify. They've really they've changed and grown with every situation that comes up. And they've looked at problems and they've said, okay, we have these problems. We're going to put a plan in action that's going to help increase people's well-being around us. And it's just really inspiring to watch a coalition work like that. And they're like a well-oiled machine.
I just realized that this is their 10-year anniversary.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
I was like, wait a minute, I should have asked, but too late. Maybe next episode, next time she comes on, we'll ask what is happening. What did you do, depending on when we do it, or what's happening for your 10-year anniversary. I think that'll be cool.
Well, that was just really inspiring. And it always inspires me too, when people talk about the things they're doing to raise those assets, to give parents tools and to look at the whole situation rather than just the drug use. When we start getting past the drug use and we look into the person and the families and the neighborhoods and every other situation and society, we start to see solutions. And that's what I felt today. I heard solutions. And, that's what, to me, prevention is all about. I think we looked at a real full definition of prevention today. And I thank her so much for that. But it's Friday.
Yeah.
The sun is out.
Absolutely. I'm happy. You see my face. Woohoo. Yesterday,
you should get out there.
I am actually. I'm gonna go for a walk in I live in the city. The snow is still there. They haven't really cleaned it all up.
And it's probably dirty.
Yeah, it's disgusting. That's the part I don't like.
Well, my dogs are still playing in it in the backyard, so I'm going to take them out in a little while and let them run around like maniacs because it's fun. But, this was a great show, and it's a great way to end the week. We went to CATCA. I was kind of weary after 4 days of being in a virtual conference, but, filled with information. But to end it with such inspiration is just always so wonderful.
Absolutely. Well, this is the solution, right?
Yeah, it is the solution. And you know what we say?
Nothing changes if we change nothing.
So let's start making those changes. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you soon.